One thing that's always fun as a JoJo's fan is trying to explain the series to someone, and you get to moments to where you have to explain how there are several different versions of the same character called Dio, but how they are actually the same person, but technically also different. Well, out of all of these Dios, one of them specifically is my favorite, and there's one specific fight in part 7 Steel Ball Run that made Diego Brando not only my favorite Dio, but also one of my top 5 most liked JoJo characters of all time. So today, I'm going to be doing a full breakdown into the character of Diego Brando, as well as the recap of this fight and why it specifically made him one of my favorite characters of part 7, and why this is one of not only my favorite fights of part 7, but also one of my favorite fights in the entire JoJo series. But before we look into the fight, we have to first deep dive into Diego Brando to truly understand why he's such a genius and a great villain, and why he's one of Araki's best written characters. To fully understand this fight and why I love it so much, we have to start from the very beginning and take a look at Diego's backstory. Diego is part 7's Dio, and he both is and also isn't the main villain of this part. Just let me explain. Looking at Dio's backstory, he's just a cute little kid, right? Well, no, actually he has a very tragic backstory. Somewhat parallel to the Dio of part 1, Diego actually comes from poverty as well. His parents were actually so poor that they couldn't afford to raise him, and they climbed a mountain and buried him alive to get rid of him, which is 100% some Kazuma Mishima type backstory. And what I mean by that is this causes him to grow up with a hatred for his father and starts his revenge plot against him. And similar to Kazuya, this can make him be seen as both an antagonist and a protagonist throughout the series. But a storm comes along that night, and he's later found in the middle of a flooding river by his own mother, the same one that just buried him and gave up on him. But his father still refuses to take care of him, and he's then raised by his own single mother, with them later being raised on a farm, living in poverty in the stables as a worker, and where Diego gets the name Brando from. But at this point, you would almost think that Araki is writing the same type of tragic backstories that Oda does for One Piece, because it only gets worse. Now from here is when we get the part that makes the true making of the villain that is Diego Brando. This is one of the most important parts that you need to know about his backstory. Basically, one of the workers there is the equivalent of the type of guys you see on r/nice guys, and he thinks that because he saved Dio's mom, that she now owes him a certain type of favor. Obviously, this doesn't work, and his mom says, no. But he does the most petty thing I think I've ever seen, and he decides to cut holes in the cups that they own. But later, as they're all getting served the hot stew, they now have no cups to use, as Diego and his mother literally came here with nothing but the clothes on their back. Diego, being the 200 IQ big brain kid that he is, says to his mother that they can just use the shoes that they're using, but his mother actually refuses and says that no matter even if they're poor, they're not going to give up their dignity, and she uses her own hands to hold the boiling, scalding hot food so Diego can eat out of it. And this is a tragic backstory. So because of this, her hands start getting an infection, and she later dies of tetanus a year from then. But the reason that this is so important is because this exact moment is where Diego gains something that's going to be his ultimate power, but also his greatest downfall, and that's his sense of pride. And with part 7 having so many Bible references, well, here's another one, because Proverbs 16:18, pride leads to destruction. Now this is basically the start of Diego's villain training arc, and what has him just completely go off the rails and vow to be better than anybody else in life. Okay, now you understand the backstory of the making of this villain, but before we jump into the fight, one more thing that you need to know is what Diego has done up until this point in the race. If you're looking online, you probably see Diego sometimes referred to as a secondary antagonist of Steel Ball Run, but honestly, up until about like chapter 80 or 90 or so, he was honestly one of the biggest threats to Johnny and Gyro. Not only was he actually one of the biggest contenders to winning the whole race, even ending the race, small spoiler alert, with more points than both Johnny and Gyro, but he even had a whole arc to where he faces off against Johnny and Gyro by himself and actually kind of wins because he was able to get away okay. And one thing with both Diego and Valentine fighting is at one point in the story, Diego actually offered to create an alliance with Valentine. It's during the second stage where Dio gets one of the parts of the corpse, specifically the corpse eye, and he also awakens his stand of scary monsters. The only thing you really need to know about his stand is it essentially morphs him into a dinosaur, and he can sometimes be a dinosaur-human hybrid, and it also gives him sort of dino senses, along with also being able to turn other beings and things around him into mini dinosaurs that he can control as well. But one thing about this is really really important is this is one of the few stands throughout part 7 that's actually specifically a close range stand. Most of the stands throughout this part are going to be long range stands. I mean, look at the main protagonist, Johnny Joestar. When the race reaches Kansas City, Diego personally himself calls for a meeting with Funny Valentine in an alley. And although it's not stated, I'm just going to say it. Diego's aura was just way too strong that Valentine was honestly scared to meet up with him and had to send one of his subordinates in his place. But Diego gets straight to the point and tells Valentine that he will personally collect all the corpse parts for him in exchange for one thing, and that's to be the mayor of Manhattan Island in New York City. Let's pause on that real quick because this alone lets you know a lot about Diego. Most racers are here solely for the money prize, and some are here to save their homeland and other things like that. But Diego, he's only here to put himself above everybody else in society. Basically, Diego's here for nothing more than his pride alone. But the reason I bring this up is to understand the fight between Diego and Valentine, you really have to understand who Diego is as a character. And now that we know his backstory, we can start looking into the fight and analyze it and why I think it's such an amazing fight. Diego goes on a covert mission, stealing a guard's uniform, which I just have to say, I really like this outfit for Diego, especially in all the games and stuff. But anyways, he sneaks into the Independence Hall on a mission to assassinate the president. Now, we don't get any exact dialogue on why it is that he turned against Valentine. After last time we saw them, they were going to do some sort of an alliance, but knowing Diego's character, I say that we can pretty safely assume that Diego would not be below any man, even the president of the United States, and he ultimately just wants to have the highest status himself. At this point of the story in the fight, we are in Philadelphia, and Valentine's ability has not been fully revealed yet, which is a very important thing to know, because Diego's actually the character to be the first one to realize what Valentine's true ability is. Diego is now pursuing after Valentine at the same time that a man named Weka People is pursuing after Diego, as he's actually a subordinate of Valentine. But Diego knows this, and since he doesn't know what Valentine's ability is yet, he actually uses Weka People as a sort of bait, hoping that if he watches from afar, he can uncover Valentine's ability. He uses his dinosaur powers to leap to the rooftop so he can look out for Weka People, and as he's scanning around the area, out the corner of his eye, he sees Weka People standing there holding a gun directly at him. Weka People shoots at Diego, but Diego's able to hit an Ultra Instinct type of reaction and narrowly dodge the bullet. He then jumps onto Weka People when he's affected by his spin ability, which, similar to Gyro, he also uses steel balls to use. Really, all that you need to know is his power induces someone with left side ataxia. It's a fancy way of saying that basically whenever you're hit by his ability, you lose all sense of seeing the left side of objects, and you also lose the function of the left side of your body. But Diego is still able to grab the gun that Weka People have, and he actually shoots Weka People when out of the corner of his eye he sees Weka People standing there, the same person he just shot, and that he actually didn't shoot Weka People, he actually just somehow shot Johnny Joestar. Obviously very confused at this point, Diego uses his dino senses to catch a scent of Valentine, piecing together that this must be some sort of his powers doing, and that he realizes that he's been led here by Valentine for Valentine to be able to kill Diego and get the corpse part from him. As the Weka People and Diego both realize that something strange is going on here, they actually both team up together to start pursuing after Valentine. Diego turns a few of the people around him into dinosaurs to track Valentine's scent, but when they finally catch up to him, suddenly they're just instantly killed. And as they fall down, Diego looks up to see Valentine with his stand, Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, attacking him, with Weka People intervening at the last moment to hit Valentine with a steel ball, but instead of actually making contact, you just see a hole open up through his face as it seems to sort of phase through him. Valentine attacks back, with Diego turning into a dinosaur and is actually able to evade several strikes, and is even able to get a hold of Valentine and overpower him, slamming him towards the wall. But just as he slams him down, Valentine seems to vanish into thin air. And then, all of a sudden, he emerges from Diego's body, which, just imagine, hitting someone and then all of a sudden they disappear, and the next thing you know, they're coming out of your own body. They both start exchanging blows with each other as Weka People comes in last second and is able to actually hit Valentine with his left side ataxia power, giving Diego just a brief moment to take a step back, where he actually does a really big brain move that's actually very smart, and he picks up a nearby rock, throwing it at Valentine just to test if Valentine's actually able to be hit. And as the rock actually makes contact and draws blood from Valentine, that gives him the confirmation that there has to be some sort of way to defeat him. This moment alone, I really want to highlight because this is our first introduction into Diego's high fighting IQ. Now, don't get me wrong, Jojo's has a lot of moments that's about outsmarting your opponents, but there also are just a lot of moments where it just comes down into which stand power is a little bit stronger and them just kind of beating each other up. And to be honest, that's kind of what it felt like for the finale of the original Dio versus Jojo. They just kind of each had their stands out and they were just kind of punching each other. But this Dio is a lot different, and one thing I want you to pay attention to, and something that I'll try and highlight, is throughout this fight, you're going to continuously see him learning from each encounter that he has with Valentine. He's going to continuously get smarter and employ this so perfectly to try and outsmart Valentine. And a lot of this is actually going to start working for him really well. After he attacks, Valentine escapes to a parallel world by covering himself with the American flag, with Diego jumping in right after him after still smelling his scent from it. Valentine is able to pull him into the world, however, leaving him half stuck between this new world and also the original world, essentially immobilizing him as he's not able to freely move around. And as Diego sees an alternate version of himself and Weka people and also multiple Valentines, this is where he gets the realization of what Valentine's ability is, and this is where we as the fans also get to realize what the true power of D4C is. Which, for the purpose of this video, all you need to know is he can go between parallel worlds to alternate himself with alternate versions of himself, and he can also teleport between these worlds, but two of the same people cannot exist in the same world, as if they touch themselves, they'll cancel out and just cease to exist. This poses a threat for Diego, as there's an alternate version of himself in this world, and as Valentine leads them to come together, he starts to almost phase out of existence. But Diego, realizing that this is an alternate world and also realizing that he's stuck in between the worlds, knows that he basically can't do anything in this situation, so he sends out his dinosaurs to lead this world's Johnny Joestar towards his location for Johnny to be able to defeat Valentine. Which is another great moment to highlight his genius, because he realizes that in this moment he's almost powerless, but he also realizes very quickly that he's in an alternate world, and although in his world he just killed Johnny Joestar, this alternate world must have a Johnny Joestar as well, and so he seeks out his help in defeating Valentine. Now, with this world's Valentine being defeated, Diego still has the problem of being stuck in between the worlds, and he already has thought of a way to escape this as well. He essentially sacrifices Weka people to cause him to merge with his alternate self, realizing that this will open up a brief portal for Diego to escape back to the original world, which this is basically right on par with his character so far, of him creating false alliances with other people that are just truly only for his own gain. Now, when I say Diego is one of Araki's best written character, this is one of the reasons why. It's because he's very consistent with Diego as a character. All the way from the start of his backstory, when he did things like marry an 80-year-old woman just for her to shortly pass away afterwards and him to gain her inheritance, he's always been known to use people for nothing more than his own personal gain. And Diego continues to do this going into the finale of this fight, and this is now where we start the main fight between Diego and Valentine, which is one of my personal favorite fights of this part, and truly one of my personal favorite fights of the entire JoJo series. Diego is out for vengeance now and chases after Valentine, following his scent to the port where he encounters Hot Pants, which is another racer in the race who, all you need to know for this video is that their stand ability is a handheld aerosol can that can be used to generate flesh, as well as allowing her to distort and extend her body and also heal wounds. That may sound very confusing. It's JoJo. It makes as much sense as it needs to. Once again, we see Diego team up with someone else to help him come out above, with them pursuing after Valentine together. But this time he teams up with Hot Pants not only to fight Valentine, but because Hot Pants tells Diego that she actually knows where his father is. And then after they win, if Diego allows her to get all of the corpse parts, she'll give him this information so he can seek out his revenge plan against his deadbeat father. And of course, Diego agrees, because aside from wanting to be above everybody else in society, another thing that drives his character motivation is the fact that he wants to seek revenge against his own father. But similar to the last times that we've seen Diego team up with people, like I mentioned, Araki is very consistent with the writing on his character, because he agrees to help Hot Pants and give her all the corpse parts, but in the back of his mind, when they enter the train, he already starts thinking about how he wants to get all the corpse parts for himself to gain the ultimate power. Once again, just agreeing with someone and using them for his own personal gain. Heading into the fight, Diego practically wastes no time, and he directly confronts Valentine, and learning from his last fight, he actually realizes that he's a little bit stronger and faster than him, since his stand is specifically for close range attacks. And with only a few slashes, he's actually able to already hit Valentine and D4C and practically cut off his hand. And knowing that anytime Valentine takes any sort of damage, he's going to try and teleport away, he already formulated a plan against this and has Hot Pants push the curtains on all the objects away from him, that way he can't cover himself and teleport away. But Valentine honestly just knows exactly how to use his stand and knocks over some water and is able to use that to escape, which I do have to be honest, it's a little bit of plot armor, but it is what it is. Which already at this fight, truly if it wasn't for Valentine knowing how to perfectly use his stand and abuse his power basically, Diego has already formulated a plan to beat him and has actually already been able to almost land a devastating and final blow to him. Even going so far as to also formulate a plan against what he expects Valentine to do, as Valentine comes back from the alternate universe now with 2 extra Valentines. But Diego and Hot Pants already thought of this and formulated a plan against this. Diego has Hot Pants also disguise him as a Valentine, that way as there's 3 Valentines in this world, Diego is also disguised as one of them, causing a lot of confusion as they don't know which one's a real Valentine and not. As they're all confused standing there pointing around like the Spider-Man meme practically, Diego instantly slashes 2 of the Valentine's throats, instantly killing them. With the main world Valentine at that moment realizing what just happened and jumps out of the train window. That exact moment is actually really important, and I'll delve a little bit deeper into this after we get through the fight, but it's important to know that Diego just instantly was able to kill 2 Valentines at the same time, but out of nothing but just, I would say, bad luck, the main world Valentine was able to escape. Wasting no time, Diego jumps through the window chasing after Valentine, and just to further prove his insane fighting IQ, he realizes that Valentine may be able to use all of these broken shards of glass from the window that he used to escape, and as he's falling down, he knocks all of them away so that Valentine has no way to teleport anywhere and cover himself with any sort of object. Truly proving that going into this fight, Diego thought of every possibility and he thought of everything that Valentine may be able to do to win and perfectly created a counter for it. And as they fall down, Diego yells out declaring his victory over him, and with a single cleave of his claws actually splits Valentine open. Essentially at this point, Diego has won the fight against Valentine. He delivered a finishing blow towards him, but at the very last breath and the very last second as the train is passing them on the train tracks, Valentine wraps his leg around Diego, pulling them both onto the train tracks as the train passes, and they are both split in half, essentially sacrificing himself but also taking Diego down with him. And this panel alone, I just have to say, is one of my favorite of this entire part. I truly love this moment in itself, as Diego is split in half laying on the train tracks, almost looking like Iggy from the original Part 3 anime. In his final words, in his final breath, all he says is, "The one who was victorious was me." Showing that even in his final moment, all that he really cared about was just being better than everyone. He just cared about the fact that he actually won a fight against Valentine. Now, obviously from here, Valentine still lives, literally just by a hair. Like, his hair actually gets caught in the train and that somehow allows him to escape. But one thing I love about this fight so much is just how consistent Oda was with the writing of Diego and how he learned so much from their original fight and employed all of it so perfectly in their second match. This fight really felt like the culmination of the character of Diego Brando. Everything from his backstory to how he is as a character, the way that he used people all along the way, and he truly didn't care about them and if they died or anything. He only cared if they only were able to benefit him. All of it wrapped up so perfectly for him fighting Valentine, and I always like to say it, he really did win in the end. Valentine's just a little bit OP and broken. And I truly do think that Valentine knew that Diego is stronger than him, and then that's the exact reason why we have the alternate world Diego Brando, which essentially Valentine brought Diego from a different universe to be in this world just in case he was defeated by Johnny, Joestar, and Gyro, so he can still have someone that would be able to deliver the Saint's corpse for him. Valentine is an amazing character, and he obviously has thought of almost every possibility as well, and he definitely is going to get his own separate video at a later time once I reach that point. But one thing I just have to say is the fact that even Valentine in the very end trusted Diego Brando for his ultimate mission. Part 7 already has amazing writing, but the way that Araki was able to so perfectly craft the character of Diego Brando makes him easily my favorite Dio in all of the Jojo series. So hopefully from this video somebody will be able to agree with me, but I hope that you guys enjoy. I'm going to be creating more Part 7 content, but I'm also still playing Eyes of Heaven to do a platinum trophy guide for that as well. So if you like to see more Jojo content, a subscribe and a like definitely do help, and maybe leave a comment as well.